accounts, the abrupt manifestation of the COVID-19 pandemic had put a halt to the days which we thought to be untouchable. From the moment the pandemic struck, the once busy streets of cities were emptied and only deafening silence envelops the entire night. In the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, the virus took the world by storm and caused hysteria in different parts of the global continent. The virus was evidently detrimental to the general welfare of mankind and forced a vast range of government institutions to consolidate parameters and alternatives that would contain the severity of the virus in the best way possible. Due to the prevalence of the pandemic, particularly in the Philippine setting, President Rodrigo Duterte and his administration implemented a community lockdown across Luzon. And as a result, this led to a variety of repercussions that soon turned into adversities that the Filipino people were yet to overcome. In dealing with the intricacies of COVID-19, join me as we unravel the realities of the pandemic and its effect on Filipino families across the archipelago. In the context of the Philippines, the COVID-19 pandemic has greatly affected communities as evident in the country's economic decline, further spreading panic among families added to the fear of contracting the virus itself. The virus effectively neutralized the Philippine market with the national government unable to efficiently and effectively combat the loss of income and job opportunities after its implementation of a nationwide lockdown. With such a case at hand, Filipino families are left with no financial income and therefore acquire sustenance in the midst of the pandemic. This left the Filipino families with no choice but to suffer starvation, along with the virus itself, in which medicines such as vaccines, facilities, and medical equipment were also scarce. Among all this chaos, however, the faith and beliefs of the Filipino people remained unshaken, with communities requesting the government to approve the opening of churches and the conducting of the Holy Mass.
In the Philippines, Roman Catholicism is a significant element of its culture. Its effect is so dominant that it penetrates the basic unit of Philippine society, the family. For starters, families, according to Roman Catholicism, begin with the sacrament of matrimony. As stated by the Catechism of Catholic Church, the matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole of life, is by its nature ordered toward the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. This covenant between baptized person has been raised by Christ the Lord to the dignity of a sacrament. Notice that the concept of marriage according to Roman Catholicism possesses two distinct features. First is the unity of a man and a woman, and second is procreation. As reiterated by the Catechism of the Catholic Church, by its very nature, the institution of marriage and married love is ordered to the procreation and education of the offspring, and it is in them that it finds its crowning glory. In the eyes of every Roman Catholic, children are the supreme gift of marriage and contribute greatly to the good of the parents themselves. Upon stating that, however, the role of the couple as parents to their children doesn't stop from procreation. According to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the fruitfulness of conjugal love extends to the fruits of the moral, spiritual, and supernatural life that the parents hand on to their children by education. Parents are the principal and the first educators of their children. In this sense, the fundamental task of marriage and family is to be at service of life. Bearing this in mind, it is important to note that for millions of Filipinos in the Philippines, Catholicism has been served as a foundation of their national identity ever since the colonial era. With this in mind, join us in following a story of a couple who experienced and surpassed the challenges brought about by the pandemic, and in diving deeper into the experiences and endeavors brought about by the pandemic. Amparo Kanda, a 48-year-old meat vendor, shares her story of how they were able to persevere in the circumstances that came along with the quarantine lockdowns with her family.
Sa gitna po ng pandemya sa ating bansa, maraming taong nawalan ng trabaho, maraming negosyo ang nagsipagsarahan dahil sa pagiging sustainable ng mga ito dahil sa mabagal na usad ng ating ekonomiya. Yun ay nangyari ng mga taong 2020 hanggang 2021 noong kasagsagan ng pandemya. So ang tanong po namin sa inyo ay, ang pandemya po ba ay nagkaroon ng epekto sa inyong financial na sitwasyon sa loob ng inyong pamilya?
Ayun ko, Tagalog.
Tagalog.
Ay, sobra. Halos mawala na. Mawala na lahat. Trabaho, buhay, pera, kaibigan, lahat mawawala pala sa pandemic. Yan ito.
So meron po bang nawalan ng trabaho sa inyong mga sa inyong mga family members?
Kami lahat, siyempre, lockdown, walang trabaho.
Ano po ba yung po niyo? Hanap buhay po ninyo?
Palengke, tindahan,
Nagtitinda po kayo ng sa palengke?
baboy, manok.
Okay. Bali, meat vendor po kayo tsaka chicken dealer po, no?
Oo.
So dahil po sa napaka peligrosong sakit na labis siyang nakakahawa, ang gobyerno po ay nagkaroon o nagpatupad ng mandatory lockdown na kung saan ang bawat pamilya o bawat tao ay ah, pinilit na manatili sa loob ng kanilang mga tahanan, lalo't lalo na yung mga wala namang negosyo sa labas ng kanilang mga bahay. Ano po ba yung naging epekto nito? Nagsawa po ba kayo na makita yung pagmumukha ng bawat isa sa inyong pamilya? O nagkaroon po ba ng mga pag-aaway? Ano po ba yung nagkaroon nung kasagsagan ng lockdown nito?
Nagka-COVID. O, tapos, nawalan ng pera, nawalan ng oras sa paglabas, pamamasyal, wala lahat. Bali, ang nangyari, ang malaking epekto nito, yung nagkasakit kami at saka nawalan ng trabaho. Pero mayroon ding one side na nakabuti dahil nagkabanding ang mga pamilya dahil parating nasa bahay.
Okay, so hindi po kayo nag-away-away, gano'n?
Nag-away-away.
Hindi po nagsama sa itsura ng isa't isa.
Ay, hindi. Kahit walang pandemic, sama-sama naman.
Okay, so maganda pala po yung relationship ninyo sa loob ng inyong family. So ano po yung mga pag-iingat na ginawa ninyo? Kamukha po ninyo, mga frontliners po kayo bale dahil nagtitinda po kayo ng mga essentials sa loob ng palengke, ano po? So ano po yung mga pag-iingat na ginawa po ninyo para po hindi kayo magkaroon ng COVID-19 or mahawa?
Face mask, face shield, iwas nagkikiusap sa di kilala.
So kagaya lang po ng mga binigay na directives ng ating Department of Health, ganun lang po yung mga
Oo,
tinapan ninyo. No?
pero mahahawa ka pa rin dahil di mo lang kung nasaan yung kalaban.
Mhm. Tsaka syempre po siguro dahil epekto na rin po ng inyong trabaho na madaling araw, mababa yung inyong immune
Hindi-
system.
resistensya.
Resistensya po mahina. Kaya po siguro nagkaroon din, na-contact niyo pa rin po yung ganoong sakit na po. So, nung nagka-COVID po kayo, despite o sa kabila ng inyong pag-iingat, ano po yung naramdaman ninyo? Kasi nag-ingat naman po kayo eh. Nag-face mask, face shield. Naliligo naman po kayo araw-araw. Pero ano po yung naramdaman ninyo na nagka-COVID po kayo?
Lagnat, sakit sa katawan.
Hindi po kayo nalungkot? Hindi niyo po tinanong si Lord bakit kayo nagka-COVID? Kasi mahina na po yung negosyo, tapos
Hindi, ba't tatanungin po? Pandemic yun eh. Hindi lang ako na-COVID tatanungin.
hindi lang po kayo eh, no?
Oo, hindi lang ako. Pandemic yun, kasalanan ko, lumabas ako, kaya nagka-COVID ako.
At saka face po yun ang buhay, ano? Hindi naman po
that's a
laging,
reality
hindi naman po laging maayos yung agos ng
Oo,
buhay.
nakiuso.
So, paano niyo po iniwasan yung mga stress sa buhay niyo nung nagkaroon kayo ng sakit o nagkaroon kayo ng lungkot dahil sa pagkakaroon ng COVID-19, pagkakaroon ng financial difficulty? Paano po kayo nag-cope up? Paano niyo po nalagpasan yun? Ginamit niyo po ba yung pagdarasal o ginamit niyo po ba yung mga advices na binigay sa inyo ng inyong mga kakilala, kaibigan o kapamilya?
Ang unang-una, pagdarasal. Parati kong iniisip yung anak ko si Pai Pai. Tapos, nakakatulong ano pa, yung mga misa sa online. Tapos yung FB, ng araw, nakakaubos ng oras para matapos yung quarantine. Tsaka medyo maiwasan, iniisip yung sakit. Pero mahirap ang magka-COVID. Depression ang kalaban. Parang solo mo na yung mundo pagpasok mo doon sa kwarto. Ganun yung COVID. Pero iwas nervyos. Mamatay ka sa nervyos.
So, nung nagkaroon po ng COVID-19, syempre po normal na in-expect nyo or na naramdaman ninyo is nalungkot po kayo and then naisip po siguro ninyo, kagaya po yung sinabi nyo, parang pasad nyo na yung mundo. So, meron po ba nagbago din sa mga daily routine nyo pagkatapos nyo po magkaroon ng COVID or habang may COVID po kayo?
Daily routine, syempre, nung nasa ospital, nasa kwarto ka lang, nabago dahil kalat-kalat ka dyan sa harapan. Tapos, daily routine, pagkatapos mo ma-COVID, parang parati kang hina. Yun, hindi mo na kaya magtrabaho ng pangmatagalan.
Yung pagod po tuloy-tuloy, ano?
Oo, yung pagod, tuloy-tuloy.
So, nung nagkaroon po kayo ng COVID, kayo po bilang mga magulang, meron po bang miyembro ng inyong pamilya na nag-step up para mag-take no responsibility o humalili sa inyo sa pagtitinda or pagnenegosyo po ninyo?
Wala, total lockdown. Double lockdown nga kami.
Kasi po, syempre dahil nakatira po kayo sa loob ng isang bahay, close contact po sila.
Close contact, bawal.
So dahil po galing tayo sa nakakahawang sakit, yung pong pasyente, sabi nyo nga po kanina, na-feel nyo po na anxious or natatakot po kayo na salamuha sa inyong mga pamilya ulit. Dahil po, syempre, nakontakan na po yung COVID na nauna. Meron po bang pagbabago nung paglabas niyo po ng hospital or pagkagaling niyo po? Nagbago po ba yung, natakot po ba kayong makisalamuha ulit? O same?
Yung first, siguro 1 week, medyo ayaw mong lumabas. Kasi discrimination na galing ka sa COVID. Yun.
Kasi kasagsagan pa po ng COVID na. So hindi po kayo natakot na makisalamuha sa pamilya niyo, pero natakot po kayo dahil din sa sasabihin ng ibang tao.
Discrimination.
So, yung ibang pamilya niyo po ba, ibang family members niyo po ba, tumulong po sa inyo? Nakatulong po ba sila sa inyo in any way para maibsan yung inyong takot na nararamdaman?
Siyempre, yung mga pamilya, suporta sa pagkain, financially, then may private nurse.
Kung naging ano niyo po sila, sandigan po ano. So, paano po yung mga pamilyang yun nakatulong po sa inyo dun sa takot na nararamdaman ninyo? Maliban po dun sa financially, yun po yung pagiging...
Oo, dahil wala naman magsasabing sikanan mo yung loob mo. Lakasan mo ang loob mo kung hindi lang sila. Pamilya, pagkaibigan, yun.
So, ano po yung mga natutunan nyo dun sa experience na ganito? Meron po bang naging lesson sa inyo?
Sa COVID,
Opo.
isa lang ang lesson dyan. Walang makakatulong kung hindi ang pamilya. Sa COVID yan ang realidad.
Family and nakatulong po ba sa inyo si Lord?
Number one, syempre.
Okay, so ngayon po, follow-up question po. Ito po kasi, final question na po ito. Na-realize na rin po ba kung gaano ka-importante po ang inyong pamilya? Lalo-lalo na po yung pong inyong asawa nung nandun po kayo sa parting yan ng buhay ninyo.
Oo, kami ang pamilya. Actually kaming apat. Kasi hindi naman papasok yung ibang tao dito sa bahay. Kami lang apat talaga, from hospital hanggang dito, kami lang talaga yung magkasama. Pero after na nung nagre-recover na, doon na pumapasok yung mga kaibigan. Pero talaga, pamilya kami apat lang talaga.
Okay po. So maraming salamat po sa inyong pagpapaunlak ng panayam. By the way po, si Tita Campi po ay isang nagtitinda sa palengke. Dealer po siya ng manok at ng baboy sa palengke. Meron din po silang maliit na store sa ilalim po ng isa nilang bahay na kung saan ito lahat po ay nagsara nung kasagsagan ng pandemya dahil silang lahat po dalawa po sa kanilang pamilya, ang nanay at tatay nagkaroon po ng COVID-19 at ang mga anak po dahil close contact ay nasa ilalim din po sa lockdown. So maraming salamat po sa inyong pagpapaunlak ng panayam and God bless po.
Amidst the pandemic in the Philippines, many people lost their jobs. Many establishments, especially small to medium enterprises, were put out of business because it was unsustainable during the slow economic movement. This is what happened to Amparo Kanda, a 48-year-old meat vendor in a public market with 2 children to support. With businesses and economy being slow, the financial situations of families like the Kandas could only get worse. The COVID-19 pandemic not only hit their family and many others financially, but also in terms of health as well. Getting infected by the virus is almost impossible to predict or prevent. And in the case of the Kanda family, they tested positive for COVID-19, which impacted their lives drastically. Mandatory community quarantine caused many undesirable things to occur in terms of finances or health. But it can also bring about small positive outcomes such as more time for families to spend together or bond, such as with the Kanda family. In light of the pandemic, frontliners who spend time in public to sell essential goods such as perishable meat need to take protocols to ensure their health and safety. However, there is no removing the risk and fears involved when there are so many people getting sick or dying because of such disease. In times like this, faith takes the front seat and becomes an important factor in keeping a Catholic family together. Faith that this pandemic will pass, and faith that we will recover from this both in health and finances. In the sacrament of holy matrimony, when the husband and wife take their vows, they utter lines such as, in sickness and in health, meaning not even these illnesses could break such bonds. Family is very important in supporting each other in very difficult times. According to Ampi, family will always be the first, if not the only one to help. That is not to say that these challenges can only be solved through faith or piousness alone. In Catholic belief, it is always about us taking the right steps with guidance to the right direction. And in this context, health and safety protocols, proper means of financial security, and yes, a little bit of faith to remain hopeful and optimistic about tomorrow.